I wasn't expecting a surprise. It was just a routine check. A few minutes before logging off for the weekend, I opened my December payslip to confirm the final deductions and bonus payout. I do this every year, one last glance before closing the chapter. At first glance, everything looked normal. Base salary, tax, benefits, nothing unusual. But when my eyes landed on the final total, something felt off. It wasn't missing. It simply didn't add up. The bonus was there, but smaller. Much smaller than it should have been. No warning, no message, just a number that didn't make sense. Not based on what I delivered this year. I reached into my drawer and pulled out last year's slip for comparison. Same base salary, same tax band, same benefit contributions, but the bonus? Last year it reflected a number that made sense, a figure aligned with the work. This year it was less than 1/3 of that. Not zero, just low enough to seem forgettable, just high enough to avoid suspicion. I didn't feel angry. I felt still, not because I didn't care, because I'd seen this move before. Quiet changes, repackaged explanations, decisions made behind closed doors and justified after the fact. My name is Isla Marin. I've spent 18 years in enterprise accounts. I don't have an assistant. I don't sit on panels. I don't ask for visibility. I bring in business, solve problems before they escalate, and hold difficult clients steady when the account managers can't. This year, I personally closed over $11 million in new revenue. I wasn't guessing. I counted. My role never made headlines. I never needed it to, but I never thought the numbers would stop speaking for themselves. I didn't ask anyone about the slip. I didn't send emails. I didn't copy legal or HR. I knew what answers would come back, if any came at all. There was a restructure. We're normalizing tears. It's part of the new compensation framework. I'd heard those phrases before, delivered with a smile and a summary slide. Later that day, while walking past the kitchen, I overheard one of the junior team members talking to someone on a call. They were laughing, excited. I think I did okay, but Isla probably pulled triple. She was everywhere this year. I kept walking, no reaction. That evening, I sat at home with my laptop still open, not working, just thinking. 2 months ago, Martin, my new manager, sent out an internal memo about changing how contributions were evaluated. Less focus on numbers, more on overall team dynamics. I skimmed it then, ignored it. It felt like standard end-of-year noise. Now it didn't feel like noise. There wasn't a meeting. There wasn't a decision I was asked to be part of. There was only a silent adjustment, made quietly, designed to go unnoticed. My bonus wasn't denied, it was rewritten, shrunk just enough to be inconvenient to challenge, but not outrageous enough to trigger a response. It wasn't a mistake, it was a message, and I got it. The next Monday, Martin called for a short team meeting, 10 minutes, he said. Just to close the quarter. It was in a smaller room than usual. No slides, just him, standing with a notepad he never opened. We did good, he said. We pulled through a tight year, realigned structure, and hit targets across the board. A lot of that was teamwork, not just individual effort. He didn't look at me when he said that, but I noticed Tara nodding and one of the newer hires clapped quietly. Then he added, "Some of you may notice adjustments in your year-end numbers. That's not a reflection of your performance, but of how we're measuring contribution now. We're flattening some of the legacy differences." No questions, no eye contact. Just a smile, a pause, and then he dismissed the room. As we walked out, someone tapped my elbow. It was James, a colleague from the finance support team. He waited until the hallway cleared, then said softly, "You know your bonus number got processed through the general pool this year, right? Not the individual scale?" I raised an eyebrow. He hesitated, not supposed to say anything, just thought you'd know. That's not how it was done before. I didn't respond. I didn't need him to explain. Instead, I asked one thing. "Did you process Martin's?" He blinked, caught off guard, then said, "No." That went through directly from him. He submitted his separately. I thanked him and walked off. That evening I went back to my notes, not numbers, just names. I listed the deals I'd handled over the past year, all 11. Then I made another column. People who were present in the final handover. Sign-offs, email chains. Martin's name showed up exactly twice. Both times he was CC'd after the deal was signed. He hadn't joined the calls, hadn't spoken to the client, hadn't even reviewed the drafts. Yet somehow his bonus had gone through individually. And mine hadn't. I didn't go digging into the system. I didn't need to. Because the next morning I saw something else. In the lobby, by the welcome desk, was a new poster. Highlights from Q4 wins, photos, client logos, quotes. A few of my deals were there, Veriton, Linxa, Quantisphere, but underneath them, in small white letters, led by Commercial Ops. No name, no team, just the department Martin now headed. In previous quarters, those slides had names on them. Account leads, client managers. Now the work had a title, not a person. Martin walked past, looked at the board, and smiled at it like a man admiring his own reflection. No lies had been told. No data changed. Nothing illegal. Just a few shifts, a few reassignments, a few names left off the record, and mine most of all. It started small. Martin began joining client calls. Not every call, just the ones that were already near closing, the kind where all the hard parts had been handled, pricing finalized, legal alignment done, just a few final check-ins, small relationship work. He'd message me the morning of, looping myself in just in case they ask anything about future support. No question mark. No space to decline. At first I didn't mind. I thought maybe he just wanted to be present. Maybe he needed to show face for his new title. That's common, that's survivable. But then came the meeting with Linxa. It was supposed to be a 5-minute check-in. Their regional director was confirming timelines for the rollout. I'd spoken to him 8 times that quarter. Knew their product stack better than our own implementation team. Everything was done. Martin joined 5 minutes late, then spoke for 10. He talked about how we shaped the package, how his team stayed late to resolve the compliance issue, how the new structure allowed faster delivery. I listened in silence. So did Lynx's director. He gave me a quick glance, like he wasn't sure if Martin was joking or just overcompensating. After the call, I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, but the shift had started. He wasn't just attaching himself to the work. He was rewriting it while I stood in the room. A week later, I walked by a breakout room and saw him reviewing slides with Tara and one of the newer associates. It was for a client summit scheduled next month, a session I usually led. They didn't invite me. I stood outside the glass for 5 seconds. No one turned around. Then I walked away. The next morning, I got an email from Angela, one of the clients I'd worked with since before Martin even joined the company. She handled procurement for Veriton, one of the largest contracts I'd ever closed. She wrote, "Hi Isla, quick check. Martin reached out to ask if future service questions should go directly to him. Wasn't sure if something changed." I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Thanks for flagging. You're welcome to contact either of us." Then I called her. Angela didn't sound suspicious, just confused. She told me Martin had mentioned something about me stepping back from direct client management to focus on internal strategy. I said I hadn't heard that. She apologized and said she'd hold off until we sorted it out. When I hung up, I didn't send a message to Martin. I didn't escalate. I didn't ask what he was doing. Instead, I started going through my calendar, quietly removing every internal training roundtable or side project that wasn't connected to revenue. If they were going to measure me by numbers, then I'd give them nothing but numbers. No extras, no exposure, no favors, only outcomes. The drift had begun, but he wasn't the only one watching. Because later that week, James from finance pinged me. One line. "You didn't hear this from me, but someone tried to move your name off the Q3 revenue summary. No system, no logs, just someone watching the margins. And that was enough." It happened on a Thursday, right after lunch, the kind of afternoon where people keep their heads down, pretending to work while already thinking about the weekend. Martin stopped me near the copier, casual voice, unreadable expression. "I'm going to take point on the Quantisphere deal," he said. "It just makes sense at this stage. Their leadership probably expects someone at my level to close things out. Better optics." I waited, expecting more, but that was it. "I'll loop you in where needed," he added, and walked away like it had been decided weeks ago. Quantisphere was not a team effort. It was one of the few deals that had been mine from day one. I'd handled the initial cold call, the follow-up demos, the concerns around regional licensing, and even the late-night email chains about implementation schedules. Every step, every piece of friction, I had solved it. Martin had joined one call, he said nothing on that call, then left halfway through with the excuse of another meeting. Now, with less than a week before signature, he wanted the credit. I didn't confront him, I didn't protest. I went back to my desk and opened the email chain with Quantisphere. The most recent message came from Leah, their partnerships director, a former colleague from another company, someone I trusted. I typed a short message. Hey Leah, heard Martin may be stepping into a more visible role for your account. Totally fine either way. Just let me know if you'd prefer I stay on point or shift into support. She called me 5 minutes later. No greeting, just, what is that about? I repeated Martin's exact words. She paused, then said, he told our CFO you'd be stepping away after contract. Said you were moving into some internal advisory role. I'm not, I replied, and I didn't approve that. Another pause, then a quiet, yeah, that didn't sound like you. We didn't say much more. She said she'd handle it and thanked me for the heads up. The next morning, a formal note came in from Quantisphere's operations team, addressed to both of us. Just to confirm, we'd like to continue working directly with Isla through contract finalization and rollout. Happy to sync with Martin later, but for now we'll proceed as is. Martin never replied to the thread, but 2 hours later, the company's internal summit, one I'd been cut out of without explanation, was suddenly postponed. No reasoning, just a vague line about conflicting schedules. That same afternoon, Tara passed by my desk. She didn't stop, but she slowed. Her eyes flicked toward me and she said quietly, I think he expected them to back him. It was the first time I'd heard her speak in weeks. I nodded once, said nothing. But later that day, I noticed something else. In the internal project tracking sheet, one of the few things Martin still hadn't locked down, my name had been removed from the client point column on another upcoming deal. No announcement, no message, just gone. In its place was Tara. She hadn't asked for it, that much I believed, but she hadn't objected either. That night, I stayed at the office late. I watched the lights shut off one by one. I stayed long enough to see who else stayed behind. James from finance, another person from legal, one of the procurement interns. No one said anything, but they all gave the same glance when they passed me. Martin wasn't just making moves, he was trying to erase me by increments, replace my name one deal at a time, and he thought no one would notice because he did it quietly, softly, as if the system was simply evolving, but something had shifted. The clients had seen through it. And now, so had a few people on the inside. Martin changed his approach after Quantisphere pushed back. He didn't speak to me directly. He stopped making casual hallway comments, stopped joining meetings without invitation. But he didn't disappear. He tightened control instead. Approval requests that used to move in hours began taking days. Basic contract templates were suddenly under revision. Meetings I'd usually attend were now happening without notice, until after they were done. I adjusted. I didn't complain. I stopped relying on old processes. I started documenting everything I touched. Dates, names, call summaries. Not to share, not to fight, just to have. The shift wasn't subtle, and it wasn't just toward me. Tara, now in the spotlight more than she was ready for, looked increasingly tense. Her emails grew shorter, her replies slower. During one client prep, she asked me, offhand, if I had any materials from an older project she could use. I sent them. I didn't comment. Later that day, I noticed her watching me in a meeting, not openly, just enough to register. Martin, meanwhile, tried to recover his footing in a familiar way, by taking credit loudly. At Friday's leadership check-in, he pulled up a slide showing Q4 revenue breakdown. 3 deals were circled, 2 of them were mine. My name wasn't listed anywhere. These were team wins, he said. We've been streamlining operations, so attribution is getting centralized. The important thing is that we're delivering together. Someone coughed. It was quiet, but not accidental. I recognized the sound. It came from Aileen, one of the newer legal counsels. Young, sharp, observant. Martin pretended not to hear, but I saw him glance toward her once, then quickly shift the slide. No one asked questions, but the air changed. The following week, Aileen dropped by my desk unexpectedly. "I'm reviewing a few contract summaries for internal training," she said. "The Veritan case, did you handle that personally?" "Yes." She nodded. "Just checking, the file in our archive doesn't say." "Let me know if you need anything," I said. 2 days later, she sent me a shared folder. Inside, a time-stamped summary of deal activities for 3 major contracts, compiled by her own hand, drawn from the original document trail. My name appeared in all of them. Clearly, she didn't include a message. She didn't need to. At the same time, I began noticing something else. Clients were copying me back into threads Martin had tried to redirect, not directly confronting him, just quietly placing my name where it had been removed. It wasn't open rebellion, but it was correction. People were noticing, not because I raised my voice, because I didn't. And in that stillness, the contrast grew sharper. Martin had made himself louder, more visible, more performative, but louder didn't mean trusted. The next mistake he made was bold. Martin tried to take over a deal that hadn't even reached proposal stage yet, a new client, high profile with a complicated background, the kind that required careful handling and a long runway of trust. I'd been introduced to them through a former client at Linksa. Quiet conversations had begun, a few exploratory calls, early alignment. Nothing formal, but movement was building. Then one morning, I received a calendar invite. Initial strategy call, Martin Clive with Westhold Group. No mention of me, no double C, no explanation. I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing the laptop. He hadn't just tried to redirect. He'd gone ahead without telling me. It was a risk. The client wasn't someone who appreciated showmanship. Their lead contact, Dominic Wade, was meticulous, slow to trust, and allergic to unnecessary layers. I knew that because I'd spent the last 2 months learning how he worked. Martin had not. The call went ahead that Friday. I wasn't on it, but 10 minutes after it ended, I received a short message from Dominic. "Appreciate the introduction to your colleague, but we'd prefer to continue dialogue directly with you if that's all right." No flair, no emotion, just correction. That same afternoon, I saw James from finance walk past Martin's office and pause. Not long, just long enough. Then he kept walking, but his glance told me what I needed to know. Something had cracked. I didn't respond to Dominic's email, I didn't need to. But by Monday, word had spread. Tara stopped by my desk under the pretense of returning a shared notebook. She placed it down, then paused. "Just so you know," she said quietly, "he's saying you were too overloaded to take on Westhold. That's why he stepped in." I nodded. Then she added, "But Leah from Quantisphere talked to our head of strategy last week. She asked why someone else was representing her account. I think that's when things started shifting upstairs." It wasn't an accusation, it was a signal. Martin had tried to centralize control, one voice, one face, his. But clients weren't playing along, and now people inside weren't either. That week, Aileen from legal made a quiet move. She sent a request to Martin's assistant for full meeting minutes from 3 recent client calls, ones where attribution had been unclear. She copied me, too. Martin replied with a one-liner. "Not sure what that's for, but happy to share what we have." Then I got a separate note from Aileen. "Just covering gaps. Some things aren't matching." No accusation, no emotion, just a careful shift. By Friday, another client copied me directly on a billing dispute Martin had been trying to handle solo. The fabric was loosening. He hadn't just overreached. He'd underestimated who was watching. And now, piece by piece, what he built was beginning to slip. By the time the Westhold situation reached the executive floor, it was no longer about one client. It started with a short email from Dominic. Firm, precise, and sent to someone higher than either of us, Ruth Chen, the company's commercial director. I wasn't copied, but I heard about it 2 hours later. "He escalated," James said, leaning against my desk for a moment too long. "Straight to Ruth. Didn't like being handled. Asked who was actually in charge." That same day, I was invited to a meeting, short notice, closed door. Ruth was there, so was Martin. He opened with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just a quick sync. Seems like there's been some confusion on client coverage. I figured we'd align directly. Ruth didn't smile. I'm not here for alignment, she said. I'm here for clarity. Martin paused, then nodded. Of course. She turned to me. Isla, did you initiate Westhold? Yes. Were you informed that Martin would be taking the lead? No. She turned back to him. He spoke fast. There was concern she had too much on her plate. I stepped in to help maintain momentum, nothing more. Ruth didn't reply immediately. She looked down at her notes. When she looked back up, her voice was even. Then explain why Westhold's lead specifically asked for Isla after the first call, and why their message included a list of previous conversations she'd already handled. Martin said nothing. That silence was longer than it should have been. I didn't interrupt. I didn't shift in my chair. I just waited. When the meeting ended, Ruth didn't offer parting words. She just left. Martin nodded at me once, something between forced civility and discomfort, and walked out without looking back. The next day, things moved. Aileen sent out a legal memo summarizing client attribution discrepancies across 4 major accounts. It didn't name him directly, but the pattern was clear. Deals reassigned after approval, names dropped from summaries, inconsistencies in meeting minutes. The memo went to legal, operations, finance, and commercial. I wasn't copied, but James forwarded it to me anyway. For your records, was all he wrote. Later that week, Martin tried to reset the story. He held a team huddle, impromptu, no agenda. He spoke about how visibility gaps happen in growing teams, how structure was always evolving, how we needed to stay flexible in how we measured success. No one asked questions. Tara stood with her arms crossed. James didn't even join. Aileen wasn't in the room. I watched him scan the group for response. He found none. When it ended, people filed out quickly. I was last. He stopped me at the door. There's a lot of noise right now, he said. People are misreading things. I know, I said. I've been watching it happen for months. Then I walked away. By the end of that day, another message came in, this time from Ruth. Short, Director. Please prepare a summary of your accounts for Q1 through Q4, timeline, contacts, and major deliverables. For internal audit, not a warning, not a fight, just a shift, one that didn't include him. The internal audit began on a Wednesday, quietly, without an announcement, but those who needed to know, knew. Ruth sent out data requests in waves, first to legal, then to finance, then one by one to the account leads whose names had shown up in Aileen's memo. Mine came late morning. Please provide project documents, meeting logs, and client communication from March to December for Veriton, Linxa, Quantisphere, and Westhold. I didn't need to prepare. I'd kept everything. I sent back a zip folder before lunch. 2 hours later, Martin was called into a meeting on the top floor. Not by Ruth, by Graham, the CFO, a name that rarely appeared in department issues, unless there were numbers involved. He didn't return to his desk after that. He went home early. The next morning, his assistant came in looking pale. She spent most of the day in HR. Meanwhile, people started getting quiet. Not out of fear, out of recognition. The story had traveled. It wasn't just one account, one client. It was a pattern. Someone had tried to rewrite outcomes in his favor, and now that someone was being asked to explain. That afternoon, I was asked to attend a follow-up review with legal and finance. No confrontation, no emotion, just questions. Was Martin present in the final Veriton negotiation? No. Did he review the Linxa addendum before submission? No. Did he draft or attend the Quantisphere scope call? But he was copied on the summary after the fact. They nodded, wrote it down, moved on. They didn't ask what I thought. They didn't need to. Later that week, I saw Ruth in the hallway. She didn't stop to talk. Just gave a short nod, a knowing one. That same afternoon, an all-staff message came in from Graham. In the interest of maintaining clarity in client relationships and internal operations, we'll be making temporary adjustments in account oversight. More details to follow. No names, but the next calendar update removed Martin from 3 major client folders. I was re-added to all of them. He didn't message me. He didn't come to my desk. He didn't show up to Friday check-in, but Tara did. She stood next to me in the break room, pouring coffee like nothing was different. Then, as she stirred her cup, she said quietly, I got asked if I ever worked on those deals. Told them the truth. I didn't look at her, I didn't have to. They were your clients, she added. Always were. Then she left. By Monday, another internal memo came out. All bonus reviews from the previous cycle are under evaluation. Any discrepancies will be addressed before the new fiscal year. The system didn't collapse. It adjusted, slowly, precisely, like it was correcting itself from the inside. And for the first time in a year, I didn't feel invisible. By the time the new quarter began, Martin's name was no longer on any of the client folders. He wasn't fired. That's not how companies like ours work. He was transitioned into a strategic support role. No one asked what that meant. No one needed to. His calendar was empty. His desk drawer was locked. He stopped showing up by week 3. People moved on quickly, as they always do. Meanwhile, I kept working. I didn't change anything, didn't speak louder, didn't reclaim credit. I just did the job, quietly, thoroughly. Then, one Thursday afternoon, Ruth stopped by my desk. She stood for a second, arms crossed, expression unreadable. We'd like you to consider stepping into a leadership role. Same scope, expanded title. Visibility would increase, compensation too. I nodded once. I appreciate the offer. She waited. You don't have to answer now. I won't take long, I said. I've already thought about it. The next morning, I declined, politely, no explanation, just, I'll support the transition, but I won't be taking the role. Ruth didn't ask why. She only said, let me know how we can make the exit smooth. The truth was, I'd already made a different decision. 3 months ago, I reconnected with someone I used to work with at Linksa. He'd left to launch his own consulting firm, focused on post-acquisition support for enterprise software transitions. Growing fast, hiring slowly, quiet reputation, solid clients. He reached out 2 weeks after the Westhold issue surfaced. Just one line. If you're ever done with politics, I've got clean work and clean books. We met once. I didn't tell him what happened. He didn't ask. He just said, if you're tired of cleaning other people's mess, you could build something that doesn't need fixing. I didn't answer then, but I'd already known. The following Monday, I submitted my notice. 4 weeks, long enough to finish what I started, short enough to not be talked out of it. When Tara heard, she stopped by quietly. You're really leaving? Yes. They'll try to replace you. They'll succeed, I said, but they won't rebuild what they erased. Her eyes said more than her words. Not regret, not admiration, just clarity. By the time my final week came, I'd completed every handoff. No unfinished threads, no unresolved clients. Just one last folder sitting on my desk, containing every closed deal, organized by phase, annotated by hand. I left it where I knew Ruth would find it. Not as a message, just as a fact. I didn't owe the system anything, but I didn't leave it broken either. On my last day, no one threw a farewell party. There was no cake in the break room, no speech, just a quiet afternoon, people walking past my desk, pretending not to know it was the end. I preferred it that way. At 4 p.m., I shut down my computer for the last time, cleared my drawer, no ceremony, no announcements. The building felt heavier than usual, or maybe I was just finally done carrying it. As I walked out, I passed Tara. She stood near the printer, pretending to read something. You're not going to say anything? She asked without looking up. I already did, I said. I stayed, I worked. That was everything I needed to say. She nodded once. You left something behind. I meant to. I walked out without turning around, but the story didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, I received a forwarded message from James. Subject line, ARE, Quantisphere, Year Ahead Review. It had gone to the executive inbox. Simple, Director. We were looking forward to Isla Marin's continuation on our account. If her exit means a realignment, we'd appreciate clarity. Our renewal discussion may need to pause until that's resolved. Not a threat, not a complaint, just leverage. Ruth replied internally, I wasn't copied, but the thread made its way to me eventually, and in it, someone had written, why wasn't there a retention discussion? No one answered that. A week later, Aileen submitted a policy revision draft to legal, A proposal to formally track contribution history for bonus decisions. Anonymous, neutral, but built entirely on the gaps Martin had exploited. That same week, Martin's strategic support role quietly ended. His profile was removed from the intranet. No memo, no goodbye. The system never apologized, it just adjusted. Quietly, precisely. One morning, I received a handwritten envelope. Inside, a single note. They offered me the role you turned down. I said no, but I did tell them something they didn't expect, that I saw more structure in the silence you left behind than in any summit he ever hosted. T. I folded the letter once and put it in the drawer beside my new desk. My new chair, my new view. I hadn't left to start a war. I'd left to stop being erased, and in doing so, I'd left behind something louder than credit. Something systems can't rewrite, a name they couldn't remove.